The laughter hit Thessaly like a blade between the ribs. It came from everywhere and nowhere, rippling through the crowded ballroom in waves of silk fans and gloved hands pressed to painted mouths. The chandeliers blazed overhead, their light suddenly too bright, too exposing, turning her into a specimen pinned beneath glass. Nobody wants you. Honoria's voice carried with theatrical precision, pitched perfectly to reach the surrounding guests, while maintaining the fiction of sisterly concern. Did you truly believe someone here would dance with you? Look at yourself, Thessaly. Look at that gown. Thessaly's hands moved instinctively to the fabric of her dress, a pale blue muslin that had been their mother's, carefully altered and retrimmed with ribbon she had bought with her own meager savings. It had seemed pretty this morning. Now it felt like a costume, a pathetic attempt at belonging in a world that had never wanted her. "I thought perhaps," she began. "You thought?" Honoria laughed again, and several young women nearby tittered in response, eager to ally themselves with the beautiful Vance sister, the one with the golden hair and the adequate dowry and the string of suitors. "That is precisely your problem, sister. You think too much and understand too little. No man of quality will ever choose you. You have no fortune, no beauty, no connections worth mentioning. You are simply leftover." The word hung in the air like smoke. Leftover. Thessaly felt the burn of tears threatening and willed them back. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of Honoria and her admirers. Not in front of the London ton who watched this humiliation unfold, like entertainment between dances. She should leave. She should turn and walk through those gilded doors and never look back. But her feet had turned to stone, trapped in this nightmare of public shame. "Come now, Honoria." A young man in her sister's circle spoke up, though his smirk suggested defense was far from his intention. Perhaps some country squire will take pity on her, someone old, with poor eyesight and lower standards. More laughter. Sharper now, hungrier. Thessaly's vision blurred. She took one step backward, then another, desperate to flee before the tears won their battle, and collided directly with something solid and warm and immovable. Hands steadied her, large hands, firm but surprisingly gentle, catching her elbows before she could stumble. The scent of sandalwood and something richer wrapped around her, masculine and expensive, utterly foreign to her modest world. "Forgive me," she whispered, not even turning to see whom she had crashed into. "I was just leaving. I apologize for—" "Leaving?" The voice that came from above her head was deep and quiet, carrying an undercurrent of authority that made the surrounding chatter falter. "But you cannot leave yet. We have not had our dance." The ballroom went silent. Thessaly turned slowly, pulse jumping against her throat, and looked up into a face that stopped her breath entirely. He was tall, impossibly so, with dark hair swept back from features that seemed carved from marble and shadow, high cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes the color of a winter storm, gray and blue and silver all at once, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. But it was not his beauty that stole her voice. It was the way everyone else was looking at him. The young men had straightened, as if called to attention by a military commander. The women had gone pink and fluttery, fans moving faster. Even Honoria had lost her cruel smile, replaced by something Thessaly had never seen on her sister's face before. Fear. "Your Grace," Honoria said, breathless and uncertain. "I did not realize you had arrived. We were simply—" "I heard what you were simply doing." His gaze never left Thessaly's face, but the temperature of his voice dropped several degrees. "The entire ballroom heard. I imagine half of London will have heard by morning." Thessaly's mind raced. "Your Grace." That meant Duke. This man was a duke. She had crashed into a duke, and he was speaking to her as if they knew each other, as if— I do not believe we have met, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. A flicker of calculation crossed those wintry eyes. No, he said softly, pitched for her ears alone. We have not. But that is about to change. He released her elbow only to offer his hand, palm up in full view of everyone watching. The gesture was unmistakable, an invitation to dance, a public declaration that this unknown girl in her mother's altered gown was worthy of a duke's attention. Honoria made a strangled sound. The orchestra, which had paused between sets, struck up a waltz. Your Grace, Thessaly whispered, I do not understand what is happening. His smile was razor-thin, beautiful, and dangerous. Neither do they, he replied, nodding toward the frozen crowd. And that, Miss Vance, is precisely the point. He knew her name. She had never seen this man before in her life, and he knew her name. Thessaly looked at his outstretched hand. Then she looked at Honoria, whose face had gone the color of curdled milk. She placed her hand in his. The murmur that swept through the ballroom was like wind before a storm. And Thessaly realized, with dawning terror and exhilaration, that she had just stepped into something far larger than a single dance. His hand closed around hers with the certainty of a man who had never been refused anything. The crowd parted before them like water yielding to a ship's prow, faces blurring past in a smear of jewels and judgment. Thessaly felt every eye tracking their progress to the center of the dance floor, felt the whispers igniting like small fires in their wake. Who is she? Did he say Vance? The plain one? There must be some mistake. There was no mistake. And that was what terrified her most. The Duke positioned her with practiced ease, one hand settling at her waist, the other lifting her fingers, with an intimacy that sent heat flooding up her neck. He was close. Too close. She could see the individual threads of silver woven through his gray eyes, could count the faint lines at their corners that suggested he smiled rarely, but meant it when he did. He was not smiling now. Follow my lead, he murmured as the music swelled. And try not to look so frightened. It undermines the effect. What effect? Thessaly hissed back. I do not know you. Why are you doing this? Questions later. He swept her into the first turn with fluid grace, and despite her racing thoughts, her body responded to his lead as if they had danced together 100 times. For now, smile. Pretend, for the next 3 minutes, that you are exactly where you belong. But I don't belong here. My sister made that abundantly clear. Your sister, he said, the word dripping with contempt, is a fool, and fools rarely recognize value when it stands before them. Another turn. Thessaly caught a glimpse of Honoria at the edge of the floor, clutching a young viscount's arm, her face cycling through shock, fury, and something like panic. Good. The thought was petty and beneath her, but Thessaly savored it anyway. People are staring, she said. People always stare. It is what they do instead of thinking. He guided her through a complicated series of steps. By tomorrow, every drawing room in London will be discussing the mysterious Miss Vance, who captured the attention of the Duke of Thornwood. Thornwood? The name crashed through her awareness like a thunderclap. Crispin Ashworth. The Duke of Thornwood. She had heard of him, of course. Everyone had. The richest duke in England. The most powerful. The most reclusive. He had not attended a society event in over 2 years. Not since... Your father, she breathed before she could stop herself. He died 2 years ago. You have been in mourning. His jaw tightened. I have been otherwise occupied. Then why are you here tonight? Why approach me? Because you were convenient. The bluntness stole her breath. Convenient? You were being publicly humiliated by a woman I find tedious, in full view of a society I find exhausting, at precisely the moment I required a distraction. His grip on her waist tightened fractionally. You served a purpose. Now you will continue to serve it, at least until this dance concludes. Thessaly's jaw set with quiet defiance. I'm not a tool for your amusement. Your grace. No. He looked down at her, and curiosity replaced the calculation in his expression. No, I'm beginning to suspect you are not. The waltz carried them past the orchestra, past the chaperones, past a cluster of young lords who watched with naked envy. What happens when the music stops? She asked. That depends entirely on you. On me? I'm about to make you an offer, Miss Vance. You may accept it and change your circumstances considerably. Or you may refuse and return to your sister's tender mercies. His thumb traced an absent circle against her waist. I suspect I already know which option you will choose. The music was slowing. The final measures approached. What kind of offer? Thessaly demanded. The kind that requires privacy and discretion, and a willingness to enter into an arrangement that will benefit us both. He spun her through the last turn, holding her closer than propriety allowed. I need something from you. Something only a woman in your particular position can provide. My position? You mean poor? Unmarriageable? Unwanted? I mean overlooked. The music stopped. He held her still for one beat too long, letting the crowd drink in the image of them together. You exist on the margins. No one of consequence watches you. That makes you valuable to me in ways you cannot yet imagine. He released her slowly, then offered his arm. Walk with me to the terrace. Let them see you leave on my arm. And then I will explain exactly what I am proposing. Thessaly hesitated. This man was dangerous, not in the crude way of fortune hunters, but in the quiet way of someone who reshaped the world to his will. But behind her, she could hear Honoria's voice rising in agitated conversation. Yes, Thessaly said, placing her hand on the Duke's arm. Show me your terrace. His smile returned, edged with triumph. They walked together through the parting crowd, and Thessaly tried to ignore the feeling that she had just agreed to something far more binding than a conversation. The terrace was cool and dark after the blazing heat of the ballroom. Now, Thessaly said, turning to face him, tell me what you really want. The Duke did not answer immediately. He moved to the stone balustrade, looking out over the darkened gardens, as if gathering his thoughts. Though Thessaly suspected a man like this never needed to gather anything, he simply chose when to deploy it. My father left behind considerable complications when he died, he said finally. Political entanglements, social obligations, and one particular expectation that I have been avoiding for 2 years. Marriage, Thessaly guessed. He turned to face her, moonlight catching the sharp angles of his jaw. You are quicker than your sister gives you credit for. That is not a high threshold to clear. Appreciation crossed his features briefly. No, I suppose it is not. He clasped his hands behind his back. The situation is this. My grandmother, the Dowager Duchess, has grown impatient with my resistance to matrimony. She has identified a suitable candidate, Lady Philippa Wendover, the Earl of Marchmont's daughter. Wealthy, connected, impeccably bred. She sounds perfect. She is perfectly acceptable. That is the problem. His voice hardened. I have no interest in accepting what has been chosen for me. But my grandmother is relentless, and Lady Philippa's family has begun treating the match as settled. I need a disruption, a complication that will buy me time. The pieces click together. You want me to pretend. I want you to be seen, to be wondered about, to create enough speculation that my grandmother cannot force an announcement without appearing foolish. He took a step closer. I want you to spend the remainder of the season as my guest at Thornwood House, to attend events on my arm, to let society believe I have developed an interest in an unexpected direction." Thessaly laughed, the sound brittle. "You want me to pretend to be your courtship interest? The unwanted Vance sister? The one with no fortune, no beauty, no connections?" She threw Honoria's words back at him. "Society will never believe it." "Society will believe whatever I tell them to believe. That is the privilege of my position. And what do I receive in return? What do you want?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that. "Security," she heard herself say. "I want to never worry about being a burden again. I want a future that does not depend on my sister's charity or some elderly widower taking pity on me. I want—" She stopped, aware of how much she was revealing. "Go on." "I want a matter." The words came out fierce. "Even if it is only for a few months. I want to walk into a room and not feel invisible. I want to know what it is like to be chosen, even if the choice is a lie." "Those are honest desires," the Duke said quietly. "More honest than most people would admit. Honesty is all I have." He studied her for a long moment, and she had the uncomfortable sensation of being truly seen. "Very well. Here are my terms." He began pacing. "You will reside at Thornwood House as a guest. You will be presented as a connection of my late mother's family. You will accompany me to events of my choosing. You will be polite to my grandmother, who will despise you on principle. You will maintain the appearance of a possible attachment without crossing into impropriety. And when it ends? When the season concludes, you will return to your family with a generous settlement, enough to establish yourself independently, with letters of introduction to respectable households. You will never want for options again." It was more than she had dared imagine. And yet— "I have conditions," Thessaly said. His eyebrow rose. "You are negotiating with a duke." "I'm protecting myself from a duke." The corner of his mouth lifted. "Name them." "First, I want correspondence privileges. I want to write to my old governess, Miss Pemberton. She is the only person who has ever truly cared for me." "Granted." "Next. Second, when this arrangement ends, I want your word that no scandal will attach to my name. I may be poor, but I will not be ruined." "Also granted. You have a third condition?" Thessaly lifted her chin. "If you decide to actually marry during this arrangement, whether Lady Philippa or anyone else, you will tell me immediately. I will not be paraded as a decoy while you conduct a real courtship in secret." "You think I would do that?" "I think powerful men rarely consider the consequences of their choices on those beneath them." Respect surfaced in his expression. "You have my word," he said slowly. "All 3 conditions. If I violate any of them, you may walk away with the full settlement regardless." Thessaly extended her hand, forgetting that ladies did not shake hands like merchants. He took it anyway. His grip was warm through her glove, and he held on a fraction longer than necessary. "Do we have an agreement, Miss Vance?" She thought of Honoria's sneering face, of the ballroom's cruel laughter, of years stretching ahead filled with nothing but dependence. "We have an agreement, Your Grace." He released her hand, but not her gaze. "Then I suggest you say goodbye to your sister. You will not be returning home tonight." "Tonight? But my things will be sent for. My carriage is waiting. And Miss Vance?" He moved past her toward the terrace doors, pausing with his hand on the frame. "When we are in private, you may call me Crispin. When we are in public, you will gaze at me as though I hung the moon." "And how will you gaze at me?" He looked back over his shoulder, and for one unguarded moment, she saw something beneath the mask. "As though you are the first interesting thing to happen to me in 2 years." He disappeared through the doors, leaving Thessaly alone with the moonlight and the dawning realization that her entire life had just changed. She followed him back into the ballroom, and she did not look at Honoria once. The carriage wheels ground against cobblestones as they turned onto a street Thessaly had only ever seen from a distance. Mayfair. She pressed her face to the window like a child. The townhouses here were not merely large, they were monuments. Cream-colored facades glowing beneath gas lamps, windows tall enough to frame giants. "You have never been to this part of London," Crispin observed. "I have walked past it once." She did not look away from the window. "My mother brought me when I was 9. She wanted me to see how the other half lived." "Did it inspire you?" "It made me angry." The admission slipped out. All that wealth, all that comfort, and we were counting candles to make them last the month. She expected judgment. Instead, she heard something like understanding. "Anger can be useful," he said quietly. "It is better than despair." The carriage stopped before a house that made the others look modest. Thornwood House rose 4 stories into the night sky, its windows blazing with light, its entrance flanked by columns that would not have looked out of place on a Greek temple. Footmen materialized to open the carriage door. Thessaly's legs trembled as she descended. "Breathe," Crispin murmured, his hand finding the small of her back. "They are only servants." "They are looking at me." "They are paid to look at everyone who enters this house." The interior stole what remained of her composure. An entrance hall large enough to host a ball. A staircase that curved upward like a frozen wave. Chandeliers dripping with crystals. And everywhere, the subtle evidence of wealth so old it had become invisible to those who possessed it. Paintings that belonged in museums. Furniture that had probably been sat upon by kings. Thessaly stood very still, terrified that if she moved, she would break something irreplaceable. "Mrs. Blackwood," Crispin addressed a severe woman in dark bombazine. "This is Miss Thessaly Vance. She will be staying in the Rose Suite. See that she has everything she requires." The housekeeper's eyes swept over Thessaly, taking in the altered dress, the unfashionable hair, the shabby gloves. "Of course, Your Grace. Shall I send for a lady's maid?" "Yes, someone patient and discreet." "I will send Nell. Will there be anything else?" "Inform my grandmother that I will call upon her in the morning. She will undoubtedly have heard about tonight's events by then." The housekeeper departed, and Thessaly became acutely aware that she was alone with the Duke. "Your grandmother lives here as well?" "In the East Wing. She has her own household within the household." A shadow crossed his features. "She will want to meet you tomorrow, to assess the threat you pose to her plans." "Am I a threat?" "You are whatever I need you to be." He turned toward the staircase. "The Rose Suite is this way. You should rest. Tomorrow will be considerably more challenging." She followed him past portraits of Ashworth ancestors, who watched her with painted disapproval, until they reached a hallway, lined with silk wallpaper, the color of dawn. "Here." He pushed open a door. The Rose Suite was larger than her family's entire house. Thessaly stepped inside, turning slowly. The 4-poster bed with its cascading curtains. The sitting area before a crackling fireplace. The writing desk beneath windows that would flood the room with morning light. "This is mine for the entire season." It was my mother's favorite guest room. She used to say the light here reminded her of her childhood home. He lingered in the doorway. "You will find it comfortable." "Comfortable," she laughed. "I have been sleeping in an attic room with a cracked window and a mattress older than I am." "This is what you deserve," Crispin said quietly. "Whatever your sister has told you, you deserve rooms with good light and fires that do not smoke." Thessaly met his eyes, startled by the intensity there. "Why do you care what I deserve? I am simply convenient, remember?" The mask slipped, revealing something rawer beneath. "Perhaps I am tired of watching people be treated as less than they are." He stepped back. "Good night, Miss Vance." The door closed softly behind him. Thessaly sank onto the edge of the bed. What had she agreed to? What world had she stepped into? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. A young maid entered, red-haired and round-faced, carrying a tray of tea and biscuits. "I am Nell, miss. Mrs. Blackwood said you might be hungry." Thessaly's eyes burned with unexpected tears. Kindness. Such a small thing. Such a devastating thing when you had grown unused to receiving it. "Thank you, Nell. That is very thoughtful." She did not sleep for hours. And when she did, she dreamed of winter-gray eyes and questions she was not ready to answer. Morning arrived too quickly and too brightly. Nell helped her dress in one of the gowns that had mysteriously appeared in the wardrobe overnight, a day dress of soft primrose muslin that fit perfectly. Thessaly did not ask where it came from. "His Grace takes breakfast at 8, Nell informed her while arranging her hair. "But the Dowager Duchess does not receive visitors until 10. She says morning light is unflattering to women of a certain age." "Is she very frightening? The Dowager?" Nell's hands paused briefly. "She is particular, miss, about everything, but especially about His Grace. And she had someone specific in mind for him. Lady Philippa Wendover. The Dowager has already ordered the wedding trousseau. Twice. His Grace keeps refusing to propose." Thessaly filed this information away carefully. Breakfast was solitary. Crispin had already departed for some mysterious business. She forced herself to eat, knowing she would need the strength. At precisely 10 o'clock, a footman escorted her to the East Wing. The Dowager Duchess received visitors in a morning room decorated entirely in shades of ice. White walls, silver furniture, pale blue accents, and at the center, enthroned in a chair that was not quite a throne, sat a woman who made winter look warm. She was perhaps 70, silver-haired and straight-spined, with the same gray eyes as her grandson. But where Crispin's gaze held complexity, hers held only assessment. "So," her voice cracked through the quiet like ice breaking, "you are the creature my grandson dragged home from the Ashford ball." Thessaly curtsied, drawing on every lesson her mother had taught her. "Your Grace, thank you for receiving me. I did not receive you. I summoned you." The Dowager gestured to a lower chair. "Sit. Let me look at you properly." Thessaly sat, folding her hands to hide their trembling. "Vance." The Dowager pronounced the name like something distasteful. "I know that family. Your father was a clerk, was he not?" "He was a solicitor's assistant, Your Grace, and the estate is not crumbling. It is merely economical." "Economical?" A thin smile. "Is that what we call poverty now? And your mother?" "Dead these past 8 years. Pity. I am told she had grace about her, before she married beneath herself." The Dowager leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Which brings us to the question. What exactly do you think you were doing with my grandson?" "I am doing what he asked of me, Your Grace. Nothing more." "Nothing more?" "You spent the night in this house. You danced with him in front of half the ton. And now, society believes the Duke of Thornwood has developed an interest in a nobody from nowhere." The Dowager's voice hardened. "Do not insult my intelligence by pretending this is innocent." Thessaly held her gaze. "I will not pretend anything to you, Your Grace. Your grandson found me useful. He needed a distraction from Lady Philippa, and I needed an opportunity. We have an arrangement." "An arrangement?" The Dowager sat back. "You admit this openly. Would you prefer I lied? You have had 70 years of practice reading people. I have had 22 years of practice being invisible. The mathematics favor you." A beat of quiet fell between them, cold and expectant. Then the Dowager laughed. It was not warm, but it was genuine. "You have spine," she observed. "I did not expect that. Your sister certainly lacks it, for all her beauty. You look me in the eye and tell me truths I do not wish to hear." "Honesty is the only currency I possess, Your Grace." "Then spend it wisely." The amusement faded. I will tell you what I told my grandson 2 years ago. He owes this family an heir. Every month he delays is a month. The Ashworth legacy dangles over an abyss. With respect, Your Grace, that is a conversation for you and the Duke. Everything in this house is a conversation for me. The Dowager rose, moving to the window. Do you know why my grandson has refused to marry? His father died. His father died, yes, but that is not the whole truth. She turned, profile sharp against the light. Crispin was in Scotland when it happened. He chose to stay an extra week for the hunting, and while he was shooting grouse, his father collapsed. By the time word reached him, by the time he returned, Thessaly's throat tightened. He did not get to say goodbye. He did not get to say goodbye. He did not get to apologize. He did not get to tell his father any of the things sons need to tell their fathers before the end. The Dowager's voice held no sympathy, only fact. And now he punishes himself by refusing to live. The pieces rearranged themselves in Thessaly's mind. The coldness, the control, the way Crispin spoke of duty as burden. He was not avoiding marriage because he did not want it. He was avoiding it because he did not believe he deserved it. Why are you telling me this? Thessaly asked. Because you are either going to help him or hurt him, Miss Vance. The Dowager stood before her, close enough that Thessaly could smell her expensive perfume. If you are truly just an arrangement, then play your role and disappear. But if you become something more... She paused, and for one moment, the ice in her eyes melted. He has been somewhere else since his father died. Present, but not present. Perhaps you can reach him, perhaps not. But if you give him hope, and then take it away, you will destroy me. I will make you wish for destruction. The Dowager stepped back. Are we understood? Perfectly, Your Grace. Good. Then you may go. If you are going to impersonate someone worthy of my grandson's attention, you will need considerably better wardrobe. Thessaly rose, curtsied again, and fled the ice-colored room with her pulse racing and her mind reeling. She had survived the gatekeeper, but she suspected the real trials were only beginning. The week that followed was a blur of transformation. Madame Fontaine, the most exclusive modiste in London, arrived with an army of assistants and enough fabric to clothe a village. She circled Thessaly with pins in her mouth, muttering in French about proportions and coloring. The cerulean will make your eyes sing, she declared, holding a swatch of blue silk against Thessaly's cheek. And the champagne for evening. Gold embroidery along the bodice. You will be magnifique. Thessaly stood still while assistants pinned and tucked, feeling less like a person and more like a dressmaker's dummy. Beyond the dress fittings, there were dancing lessons with a terrifying Italian master who shouted about posture, etiquette refreshers with Mrs. Blackwood, lessons on which fork to use, how to pour tea, the proper angle at which to hold a fan. Thessaly absorbed it all with desperate focus. Through it all, Crispin remained distant. He appeared at meals, polite and proper, inquiring about her progress without actually engaging. He approved expenditures without looking at numbers. He nodded at reports of her improvement, without offering praise. It was as if the man who had defended her at the ball had retreated behind walls she could not breach. On the fifth evening, Thessaly had had enough. She found him in the library, naturally. Leather chairs, crackling fire, books climbing to the ceiling. You have been avoiding me, she said from the doorway. He did not look up from his ledger. I have been managing estate business. You have been hiding behind estate business. She entered uninvited, settling into the chair across from his desk. Your grandmother told me about your father. About Scotland. His jaw tightened. My grandmother talks too much. She cares about you too much. Thessaly folded her hands in her lap. I am not asking you to share your grief with me. I am simply asking you to stop treating me like furniture. I do not. You have not spoken more than 20 words to me in 5 days. She leaned forward. If we are to convince society that you have developed an interest in me, you will need to actually look at me occasionally. Tension gathered between them, charged and unfamiliar. Then, slowly, Crispin set down his pen. "You are right," he said. "I have been elsewhere. When things become complicated, I retreat to numbers and ledgers, things that can be controlled. And I'm complicated? You're unexpected." He rose, moving to a shelf and pulling down a slim volume bound in burgundy leather. "I prepared for a business arrangement. I did not prepare for someone who would storm into my library and demand to be seen." He extended the book. "What is this?" "Keats. You mentioned you enjoyed poetry but had never owned a volume of your own." He did not quite meet her eyes. "Consider it a peace offering." Thessaly took the book carefully, her fingers brushing his. The leather was soft, worn from handling. "This was yours." "It was my father's originally. He gave it to me when I was 16. Crispin returned to his chair. He said Keats understood that beauty and sorrow were the same thing, and that any man who could not appreciate both was only half alive. He sounds wise. He was. The word came out rough. I miss him. Every day. Sometimes the weight of that absence is so crushing I cannot breathe. It was the most honest thing he had ever said to her. Thessaly held the book against her chest. "I lost my mother when I was 14, she said softly. She was sick for months before the end, but I still was not ready. I do not think you can ever be ready." Crispin studied her across the fire-lit space, and recognition passed between them, the acknowledgement of shared sorrow. "Perhaps we are both still learning how to live with our ghosts," he said. "Perhaps we are." The fire crackled, and somewhere in the quiet, something thawed between them. "The Worthington Ball is in 3 days, Crispin said finally. "It will be your first major appearance. Society will be watching closely. Are you worried I will embarrass you?" "I'm worried," he said slowly, "that you will outshine every woman there, and I will have to spend the entire evening fighting off suitors." It was almost a compliment, almost teasing, almost human. Thessaly smiled, the first genuine smile she had felt in days. "I shall try to be moderately luminous," she promised. "Just enough to intrigue, not enough to cause riots." He returned the smile, faint, but real. That sounds like an acceptable compromise. The moment held. And then he returned to his ledgers, and she returned to her borrowed room, and neither acknowledged that something had changed. But they both felt it. The walls were crumbling, and beyond them, something dangerous was beginning to grow. The Worthington Ball blazed like a jewel against the London night. Thessaly stood at the top of the grand staircase, her pulse quickening. The champagne silk gown Madame Fontaine had created clung to her figure before falling in elegant waves, gold embroidery catching the candlelight. Her dark hair had been threaded with seed pearls that the dowager herself had provided with a curt. "If you must represent this family, you will do so properly." She looked like someone else entirely. She looked like she belonged. "Breathe," Crispin murmured beside her. "You have conquered my grandmother. This is merely a room full of strangers. A room full of strangers who will be judging every step I take." "Then give them something worth judging." The major domo announced them. His Grace, the Duke of Thornwood, Miss Thessaly Vance. The whispers began immediately. Thessaly descended the staircase on Crispin's arm, chin lifted, smile fixed in place. She felt every eye tracking their progress. Is that her? The one from the Ashford Ball? She cleans up rather well, but honestly, what is Thornwood thinking? At the base of the stairs, a receiving line of Worthingtons waited. Lord and Lady Worthington were gracious, if curious. Their daughter, Miss Arabella Worthington, studied Thessaly with sharp assessment. And behind them, Watching from across the ballroom with barely concealed fury stood Honoria. Thessaly's step faltered. Her sister was dressed in rose silk, her golden hair perfectly arranged, her attention fixed entirely on Thessaly. "Steady," Crispin said. "She cannot touch you here. She is my sister. She can always touch me. Not tonight. Tonight, you are under my protection." They had barely cleared the receiving line when Lady Philippa Wendover materialized, beautiful and blonde in ice blue silk. "Your Grace." Lady Philippa's curtsy was impeccable, her smile sharp. "How delightful to see you emerging from your hermitage. And Miss Vance, is it not?" "We have not been properly introduced," Thessaly agreed, "though I have heard much about you." "Have you?" Her gaze swept over Thessaly's gown. "Your dress is lovely. Madame Fontaine has done wonders with limited material." The insult was delicate, deniable, devastating. Thessaly smiled sweetly. "She is talented at recognizing potential. I understand she declined several clients this season. Something about refusing to polish brass when gold was available." Lady Philippa's eyes widened. The barb had landed. Before she could respond, Crispin intervened. "If you will excuse us, I believe I promised Miss Vance the first waltz." He swept Thessaly away, guiding her toward the dance floor. "That was well done," he said, as they took their positions. "Where did you learn to joust with words?" "I have a sister who has been sharpening her tongue on me since childhood. Lady Philippa is an amateur." The orchestra struck up. Crispin's hand settled at her waist, and they began to move. This time, Thessaly did not count steps. She simply followed his lead, letting the music carry them. "People are staring," she observed. "Let them." His grip tightened. "You are magnificent tonight." Her breath caught. "You should not say things like that." "Why not?" "Because this is an arrangement. In a few months, I will return to my life, and you will marry someone suitable." "And if I do not want that?" His voice dropped. "What if I am beginning to want something else entirely?" The world narrowed to the space between them, his eyes, winter gray and intent, his hands holding her as if she were precious. "Crispin, do not answer yet." He spun her through a turn. "I should not have said that. Not here. Forgive me." The music ended. Before she could respond, Honoria appeared at her elbow. "Sister." The word dripped with false sweetness. "How unexpected to see you here." "Honoria, you look well." "I look better than well. I look like someone who belongs." Honoria's smile sharpened. "Which is more than can be said for you, whatever costume you are wearing." "This costume was commissioned by a duke. What does that say about his taste?" "It says he is easily distracted by novelty. But novelty fades." Honoria leaned closer, voice dropping. "Enjoy this fantasy while it lasts. By the end of the season, you will be back in that attic room. That is how these stories always end. Perhaps this story will be different. Stories do not change, only the fools who believe in them." Honoria stepped back. "Do give my regards to our father. I am certain he is wondering when his burden will be returned." She swept away. "What did she say?" Crispin had returned, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. Nothing that was not true. Thessaly took the champagne and drank deeply. "She reminded me that this is temporary." "Thessaly, not here." She set down the glass. "Please, I cannot discuss this here." He studied her, then nodded. "The garden. There is a terrace beyond those doors." She followed him out into the cool darkness. "Tell me," Crispin said quietly. "Tell me what she said." Thessaly wrapped her arms around herself. "She said that by the end of the season, I will be back where I started, and you will be married to Lady Philippa. And you believe her?" "I believe that wanting things is dangerous. That hope is just another word for future disappointment." He moved closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth. What do you want, Thessaly? Not what you fear. What do you actually want? She turned to face him, tears threatening. I want this to be real. I want to matter to someone who sees me, truly sees me, and chooses me anyway. I want to stop being the unwanted one. I want... She stopped. You want what? I want you, and that terrifies me more than anything Honoria could ever say. The words hung between them, raw and impossible to take back. Crispin's hand rose to cup her face. Then we are both terrified, he said. Because I want you to. More than I have wanted anything in 2 years. This is madness. Probably. It cannot end well. Perhaps not. Crispin. He kissed her. Not the careful, performative kiss of a public charade, but something real and desperate and hungry. She kissed him back with equal fervor. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, the world had shifted. Tomorrow, Crispin said hoarsely. Tomorrow, we will talk properly about what this means. And tonight? Tonight we return to the ballroom. We pretend. But as they returned to the blazing lights, she knew that pretending would never be the same again. Something had broken open between them, and neither could put it back. The days following the Worthington ball passed in a strange, suspended state. They did not speak of the kiss, not directly. But everything had changed. Glances held a heartbeat too long, fingers brushing when passing books, the careful distance collapsing into something warmer in private moments. Thessaly found herself seeking him out in the library each evening, their conversation stretching later into the night. Tell me about your mother, she said one evening, curled in the leather chair that had become hers. Crispin stared into the flames. She was gentle, he said finally. Quieter than my father. She preferred gardens to ballrooms. I think she found being a duchess exhausting. How old were you when she died? 7. Old enough to remember her clearly. Young enough that the memories feel like dreams. He paused. She used to read to me every night. Fairy tales, where love conquered everything. I believed her. And now? Now I know that love does not conquer. It wounds. It leaves scars that never fully heal. He turned to face her. I loved my father more than anyone, and losing him broke something in me. Thessaly set aside her book and crossed to sit beside him. Perhaps fixing is not the goal, she said softly. Perhaps we simply learn to carry the broken pieces differently. That sounds like wisdom. That sounds like survival. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally. You are remarkable, he said quietly. You have been dismissed and diminished your entire life, and yet you refuse to become bitter. I became small for years, Thessaly admitted. I believed what Honoria said, that I was plain, that I was unwanted. She squeezed his hand. It was not until I came here that I began to wonder if perhaps the problem was not me at all. What changed your mind? You did. The words slipped out. The way you look at me, as if I am intelligent and capable, as if my opinions matter, as if what? As if I am beautiful. Crispin turned to face her fully, his free hand rising to cup her cheek. You are beautiful, he said. Not because of your gown or your hair. You are beautiful because of the fire in your eyes when you argue with me. Because of the courage it takes to keep hoping. Tears pricked at Thessaly's eyes. You should not say such things. I should have been saying them from the beginning. He leaned closer, forehead touching hers. I have wasted so much time hiding from grief, from life. And then you arrived, and everything I had built began to crumble. Is that a bad thing? I thought so at first. Now I think it might be the best thing that has ever happened to me. He kissed her then, soft and slow, tasting of whiskey and longing. She melted into him. When they finally separated, both were breathing hard. We should stop, Thessaly whispered. This is dangerous. Everything worth having is dangerous. Crispin, I know. He pressed his lips to her forehead. I know there are consequences. But I cannot pretend any more, Thessaly. I cannot pretend that you are just an arrangement. Then what is it? He pressed something into her hand, wrapped in velvet. Thessaly unwrapped it to find a brooch, an oval of deep blue enamel surrounded by tiny diamonds, with a miniature portrait at its center. Your mother, she breathed. She wore it on her wedding day. My father gave it to me when I turned 21. Said I should give it to someone who reminded me of her. His voice was rough. I never thought I would find anyone. Thessaly stared at the brooch. I cannot accept this. It is too precious. That is precisely why you should have it. He closed her fingers around the velvet. Because you are precious too. The tears she had been holding back finally spilled over. I am falling in love with you, she whispered. I have been trying not to, but I cannot stop. Then do not stop. He wiped her tears. Fall. I will catch you. How can you be certain? Because I am falling too. He kissed her again. Because for the first time in 2 years, I want to be present. I want to be here, with you. They stayed in the library until the fire burned to embers. When Thessaly finally returned to her room, the brooch clutched against her chest. She felt lighter than she had in years. Perhaps stories could change after all. She fell asleep with a smile on her face, unaware that the morning would bring devastation. The morning of the Harrington musical dawned bright and clear. Thessaly dressed with extra care, choosing a gown of soft lavender that Crispin had once mentioned, suited her. She pinned his mother's brooch at her throat. Tonight, she decided. Tonight she would tell him that she wanted this to be permanent. They arrived at the Harrington residence to find society already assembled. Thessaly spotted Lady Philippa across the room, frigid in white silk, and the dowager near the windows. And there, surrounded by admirers, stood Honoria. The music hall proceeded with the usual parade of accomplishments. During the interval, Crispin was called away by Lord Harrington to discuss some parliamentary matter. She was reaching for a glass of lemonade when Honoria materialized beside her. Sister, what a charming brooch. New, is it not? Thessaly's hand moved to the enamel oval. Yes. A gift from your duke? Honoria's eyes glittered. I have been investigating your benefactor. I do not know what you mean. Did you know that Lady Philippa's family holds significant debt to the Thornwood estate? Honoria leaned closer. I have it on excellent authority that the Duke has been negotiating terms with Lord Wendover all season. Terms that include a marriage contract. You are lying. Am I? Ask him about the meeting last week. Ask him about the documents his solicitor has been preparing. Honoria stepped back. Oh, Thessaly, did you actually believe he wanted you? The world tilted sideways. I do not believe you, Thessaly managed. Then believe this. Honoria pressed a folded paper into her hand. A draft of the marriage announcement. Thessaly unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. His Grace, the Duke of Thornwood. Lady Philippa Wendover. Pleased to announce, forthcoming marriage. No, she whispered. He used you, sister, just as I always said he would. Nobody wants you. Not even a duke. The paper crumpled in Thessaly's fist. She pushed past Honoria, past the guests, past the servants. She found a servant's door and fled through it, out into the garden. She ran until she reached a secluded bench hidden behind roses, and there she collapsed, sobbing. It had all been a lie. Every tender word, every kiss, every promise of tomorrow. The brooch at her throat felt like a brand. She tore it off and hurled it into the roses. Thessaly! Crispin's voice, urgent and frightened. She pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling her sobs. But he found her, tear-streaked and shaking. What happened? He dropped to his knees before her. She thrust the crumpled paper at him. He smoothed it out, read it. His face drained of color. This is not what it looks like. Then what is it? A draft marriage announcement. Your name. Lady Philippa's name. I can explain. Can you explain meeting with Lord Wendover last week? The documents being prepared. His silence was answer enough. You lied to me. Thessaly stood, stumbling away. You made me believe this was real while you planned a future with someone else. It is not my marriage. It is what my grandmother wants. I have been trying to extricate myself. By using me as a shield? She laughed, ugly and wounded. Honoria was right. Nobody wants me. Thessaly, please. Do not. She backed away. Do not follow me. Do not explain. She turned and fled into the darkness. And this time, he let her go. Thessaly did not return to Thornwood House. She walked through darkening London streets until she found a hack, gave the driver her father's address, and collapsed against the worn seats. The house was dark when she arrived. But Honoria was waiting in the parlor. Home at last. I wondered how long the fantasy would last. How did you get that announcement? Lady Philippa and I have become quite close. Honoria smiled without warmth. Did you really think a duke would choose you? Thessaly sank into a chair. Why do you hate me so much? The question caught Honoria off guard. I do not hate you, she said slowly. I resent you. Resent me? You have everything. You have mother's eyes. The words came out sharp. Every time father looks at you, he sees her, the gentle one, the kind one. I am the pretty one, but you were always the loved one. Thessaly stared at her sister. That is not true. Is it not? Father barely speaks to me. Mother saved her softest smiles for you. I have spent my entire life fighting for scraps. So you decided to destroy me? I decided to survive. Honoria moved to the window. You were not supposed to be competition, Thessaly. You were supposed to stay in your attic room. And when I did not, when you did not, you reminded me of everything I could never be. Honoria turned. Kind, despite being mistreated. Hopeful, despite being dismissed. The admission hung between them. He never genuinely cared for me. You proved that. Did I? Honoria tilted her head. What I didn't tell you is that the Duke has refused to sign. 3 times. His solicitor drew up the papers at the Dowager's insistence, but Thornwood himself has blocked every attempt. The words hit Thessaly like a physical blow. What? Lady Philippa is desperate. Her father is threatening to force the Duke's hand. But apparently, Thornwood has been liquidating assets to pay off the debts independently, selling properties, doing everything possible to free himself. Why did you not tell me this before? Because I wanted you to run. Honoria's voice was flat. I wanted you to give up just once. I wanted you to feel what it is like to have hope ripped away. Thessaly rose slowly. You are cruel. I am broken. Honoria met her eyes, and for the first time, Thessaly saw the emptiness there. I thought if I could break you too, perhaps I would feel less alone. That is not how healing works. I know. Honoria turned away. Go back to him, Thessaly. The announcement was never his choice, and you were the first thing he has chosen for himself in 2 years. Why are you telling me this now? Because watching you fall apart was supposed to feel satisfying. Instead, it felt like watching myself. Honoria moved toward the door. Perhaps I am tired of being the villain. She left without another word. Thessaly stood alone, mind reeling. He had refused to sign. He had been fighting for her, and she had run without letting him explain. The brooch, his mother's brooch. She had thrown it away like it meant nothing. A sob escaped her, raw and ugly. She sank to the floor and wept until there was nothing left. She had finally been chosen, and she had thrown it away. Morning light found Thessaly still on the parlor floor, her resolve crystallizing into something diamond hard. She would not let fear win. If Crispin had been fighting for her, he deserved to know she would fight for him too. She washed her face, borrowed a simple dress, and hired a hack to Mayfair. Thornwood House looked different in daylight, less imposing, more like a home. The footman recognized her. "Miss Vance, we were told you had departed." "I have returned. Is the Duke in residence?" "He is, miss, but thank you." She pushed past him. She found Crispin in the library, but he was not working. He was sitting in her chair, staring at something in his hands. The brooch, mud-streaked and rose-scratched. "You found it," she said from the doorway. He looked up, and her chest clenched at the devastation in his face. Dark circles, hair disheveled, the careful control shattered. "I went back to the garden. Searched for hours." He turned the brooch over. "I thought you had thrown it away because you hated me. I threw it away because I was hurt and frightened and believed a lie." She stepped into the room. "Honoria told me the truth last night, about the negotiations you have been refusing, about the properties you have been selling." Hope flickered in his eyes. "She told you all of that." Somewhere in the cruelty, the truth slipped out. Thessaly crossed to stand before him. "You have been fighting for me, this whole time, and I ran away without letting you explain." Crispin rose slowly, still clutching the brooch. "I should have told you about the negotiations from the beginning. I was a coward, afraid that if you knew the complications, you would decide I was not worth the trouble. You thought I would leave? Everyone leaves eventually." His voice cracked. "My mother. My father. I have spent 2 years convincing myself that isolation was safer. And then you arrived, and suddenly isolation felt like its own kind of death." Thessaly reached up to cup his face. "I am not leaving," she said firmly. "Not because of your grandmother's schemes. Not because of Lady Philippa. Not because of my sister's cruelty or society's judgment. Thessaly, I love you." The words came out clear and strong. "I love your stubbornness and your grief and the way you hide in libraries. I love that you gave me your mother's brooch because you saw something in me worth protecting." Tears tracked down his cheeks. "I've been so afraid," he whispered. "Afraid that wanting you would mean losing you. Then we will be afraid together." She pressed her forehead to his. "And we will choose love anyway." He kissed her then, desperate and tender, tasting of salt from both their tears. When they finally separated, he was almost smiling. "My grandmother will be furious. Let her. Society will talk for months. Let them talk." Thessaly grinned. "I am done caring what society thinks." He took her hand, pressing the muddy brooch into her palm. "Will you marry me, Thessaly? Not as an arrangement. As my wife, my partner, my home." Tears of joy now. "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." He swept her into his arms and spun her around the library, both laughing like children. They were still spinning when the Dowager appeared in the doorway. "I assume I should cancel the Wendover negotiations permanently." Crispin set Thessaly down, but kept his arm around her waist. "You should. And you should prepare for a wedding. My wedding." The Dowager's gaze moved between them. Then her expression shifted. "She makes you present," the old woman observed. "She makes you here, in a way you haven't been since your father died." "She does." The Dowager was quiet. Then she nodded, once, sharply. "Very well. If you are determined to scandalize the Tun, we shall do it properly." She turned to Thessaly. "Welcome to the family, Miss Vance. Do try not to let my grandson retreat into his library for the rest of your marriage. I will drag him out myself if necessary, Your Grace." A hint of warmth crossed the Dowager's features. "Yes," she said. "I believe you will. The Blackmore Ball was the final event of the season, and all of London had gathered to witness either triumph or catastrophe. Thessaly stood at the top of the grand staircase, in a gown of deep midnight blue, embroidered with silver stars. At her throat, cleaned and polished, hung the enamel brooch that had once belonged to Crispin's mother. Beside her, Crispin wore evening clothes that made him look every inch the Duke, but his eyes held none of the cold distance that had characterized him when they first met. He looked happy. He looked present. "Ready?" he murmured. "Terrified," she admitted, "but doing it anyway. That is what courage looks like." The major domo announced them, and the whispers swelled. "Miss Vance? I heard she fled. I heard he chased after her. I heard the Wendover match has been called off entirely." They descended together, and the crowd parted before them. At the base of the stairs, Lady Philippa waited, pale. Composure cracked. "Your Grace." Her voice held none of its usual venom. "Miss Vance?" "Lady Philippa." Crispin's tone was final. "I hope you will accept my apologies for any misunderstanding." There was no misunderstanding. Lady Philippa's smile was brittle. "I simply did not realize I was competing for something that had already been given away." She departed without another word. And then, across the ballroom, Thessaly saw Honoria. Her sister stood alone. The admirers who usually surrounded her had dispersed. Thessaly crossed to her. "Honoria." Her sister turned. The mask she usually wore was absent. "Come to gloat? Come to thank you." Thessaly kept her voice low. "For telling me the truth. My motives were cruel. Your motives were honest, for perhaps the first time." Thessaly hesitated, then reached out to touch her sister's hand. "We have hurt each other for years. Perhaps it is time we stopped." Honoria stared at her. "You would forgive me? I would try, if you would let me." Then Honoria gave a laugh, soft and sad. "You really are Mother's daughter, too kind for your own good. Perhaps. Or perhaps I am tired of carrying anger." It was not reconciliation. Not yet. But it was a beginning. Thessaly returned to Crispin's side, and he pulled her onto the dance floor. The orchestra struck up a waltz. "What did you say to her?" he asked. "That I would try to forgive her. That is more than she deserves. Perhaps." Thessaly smiled up at him. "But I am done letting old wounds dictate my future." His arm tightened around her waist. "I love you. I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it. I love you too, and I am going to spend the rest of my life dragging you out of libraries. That sounds like a marriage." They danced until the music ended, then danced again, until even the most determined gossips had to admit that this was not a scheme. This was real. This was love. 1 year later, the opera house blazed with light. Thessaly sat in the Duke of Thornwood's private box, dressed in pale blue silk that echoed the gown her mother had worn so many years ago. Her husband's hand was warm in hers. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking that 1 year ago you were nobody's choice, convinced you would spend your life invisible. And now? Now you are a duchess. My wife. The woman who dragged me back to life." He lifted her hand to his lips. "Now, you are everything." The opera began, music swelling through the gilded hall. At the interval, she leaned against her husband's shoulder, letting her eyes drift closed. "Tired?" he murmured. "Content. The most content I have ever been." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Then rest. I will wake you when it ends." She smiled, snuggling closer. They had fought for this, through lies and schemes and cruelty, through their own fears and the ghosts of losses that still ached sometimes. But they had won. The opera house had a tradition, the Ton would later say. The Duke and Duchess of Thornwood attended every performance. They always sat in their private box, always arrived precisely on time. And at some point during every performance, without fail, the Duchess would fall asleep against her husband's shoulder. He never woke her. He simply held her closer and waited for the music to end. "Nobody wants you," her sister had once said, but somebody had wanted her. And that somebody held her still. Through every opera, every ball, every quiet morning and brilliant night, until the story of the unwanted sister who captured a duke became less a scandal and more a legend. A legend about courage, about choosing love over fear, and about the simple truth that sometimes the people who feel most invisible are simply waiting to be seen by the right pair of eyes.